The list feels like it's a mile long now. Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Saquon Barkley, and Nick Chubb. Everybody seems to be dealing with injuries at the running back position, but that shouldn't stop our pursuit of a fantasy championship, and why this video right here may be the most important one that you watch all season. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Like a lot of you out there, I'm reeling after the Nick Chubb injury on Monday night, a staple of this channel and one of my favorite players. It hurts knowing that I'm not going to get to talk about him the rest of the season, but we've got to move forward because we still have fantasy championships that we need to win. And this video talking about week 3 running backs might be one of the most important videos that you watch all season long. But let's try to cheer everyone up a little bit because I've got a Kenneth Walker jersey autographed that I want to give away to somebody out there courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction. And if you want a shot at this jersey or any other giveaways that we are doing this season, all you got to do is head to pristineauction.com and create a new free account using code word headliners. You're going to get a $10 coupon off of your very first purchase there, but it's also going to make you eligible to potentially win this jersey. Now, the only other thing that you need to do is leave me a comment down below letting me know which under the radar running back in this video you think is a top 12 option this week, and I'm gonna pick one commenter from this video to potentially win the jersey as long as you've got your account set up at Pristine Auction. All right, now that we got all the fluff out of the way, it's time to hop right into it and let's go to Thursday Night Football. The Giants and the 49ers, really two polar opposites. The Giants really couldn't have gotten off to a worse start this season, even though they did turn it around in week 2, and the San Francisco 49ers are hot to start the season. Now, for the Giants, it's clear that Saquon Barkley is going to be missing time, and Matt Breida will probably be the first one up, but don't forget about rookie Eric Gray either. He's been playing on special teams, doing some punt returns, and I'm sure that we're going to see him in some action. I just don't know how much we'll see. And given that this is going to be a super tough matchup against San Francisco, I don't care who you're thinking of starting, it just shouldn't be somebody from the New York Giants. Christian McCaffrey is one of the hottest players in the NFL right now, and not only is he going to be a safe start this week against the Giants, but he's also going to be my underdog pick'em to play, and I'm going higher than the 89.5 rushing yards he's currently listed at. Now, the New York Giants haven't given up a ton of fantasy points to the running back position, but they're ranked 26th right now in terms of rushing yards. So people are picking up yards on the ground against them. And considering the way that New York has played to start the season, if the San Francisco 49ers get out to a nice lead and Christian McCaffrey once again has a big game, he should easily go over 89 rushing yards. And if you want to play that pick'em or any other pick'ems that we do during the season, make sure you head on over to Underdog. Use code word headliners when you get signed up. They're going to match your first deposit up to $100, and you're going to get a special pick'em to play that's almost guaranteed to hit. And given the way Christian McCaffrey has played to begin the season and the way this matchup could go, I'm feeling pretty confident that Christian McCaffrey is going to have another big week in week 3. Indianapolis and Baltimore is going to bring a tough matchup for the running back position, as both of these teams are inside the top 10 of fewest rushing yards allowed to running backs right now. And Zach Moss is going to bring some risk for me this week. I know he's coming off a big game in week 2, but if Anthony Richardson clears the concussion protocol and comes back for week 3, he's going to be taking a lot of those touches on the ground. And given the fact that it's going to be a really tough matchup on top of that, I just don't know if the volume plus the potential upside is going to be enough to really just say, hey, we are focusing on Zach Moss as an absolute start this week. I think there's going to be a lot of risk involved with it. Indianapolis is limiting the big plays on the ground. Now, they have allowed the 12th most fantasy points to the running back position, but that's really kind of based on touchdowns to the position. In terms of the absolute volume around them, it just hasn't been there. This is a split backfield for the most most part still. Justice Hill and Gus Edwards are both going to get touches. Justice Hill got one more touch on the ground than Gus Edwards last week, even though Edwards scored a touchdown and looked a lot better in his rushing attempts. But given how tough this matchup is going to be, there's a lot of risk with both of these guys. I know we're dealing with a lot of injuries right now, and if one of these guys is a guy that you're going to have to rely on this week, I'd probably end up going with Justice Hill over Gus Edwards in the hopes that he helps in the passing game just a little bit more and maybe gets a goal line touch for a touchdown. Tennessee and Cleveland is going to bring another brutal matchup, and this would have been my Manscaped must-watch matchup if Nick Chubb were playing, but he's not. So Derrick Henry is not going to get that matchup with another elite running back. Although Jerome Ford played like an elite running back after Chubb left the other night. And one thing that I want to remind everybody watching this video right now, just because a player is in red does not mean that they are a sit. It just means that they are going to carry a lot of risk. So if you have to start them, you have to just be prepared for a performance that doesn't give you what you need to win this week. Cleveland's defense has been absolutely insane to start the season, ranking top 10 in almost every single defensive category. And now they're going to get a matchup with Derrick Henry, who in week 1 didn't look great. Looked a lot better in week 2, but unfortunately going up against this defense is going to bring some risk this week as well. The volume will still be there, but will all the rushing yards be there? Right now, this is a guy that goes maybe between 60 and 75 yards. So for Derrick Henry, we're going to need to be banking on that touchdown. The Tennessee Titans have allowed the 3rd fewest rushing yards to running backs and the least amount of fantasy points to running backs so far. It's a small sample size, only 2 weeks of the season. And if you're a Nick Chubb owner that is desperate for somebody and you got to roll with Jerome Ford, then you got to roll with Jerome Ford. I'm not expecting a big game from him though. Honestly, in this situation, my hope would be that they don't sign anybody before they play this week. But that's another reason why I have Ford listed as a huge risk this week, because who knows if maybe they trade for Cam Akers, maybe they re-sign Kareem Hunt. Who knows what they could do? But there could be another running back with Jerome Ford by the time kickoff gets here. And if that happens, given a tough matchup and the potential for split volume, it's hard to say that right now we could risk starting Ford. Atlanta and Detroit is going to bring you my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, if you need to order anything from manscaped.com, use our code word headliners. And when you do, you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. But this matchup is going to bring the 2 first-round running backs from the 2023 NFL Draft with Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Week 2 brought a lot of what we expected from the running back position in Atlanta again. Tyler Algier is still going to get a ton of touches on the ground. Bijan Robinson is going to get almost all of the passing game work out of the backfield. And he's obviously a home run threat whenever he touches the ball on the ground as well. Bijan Robinson is going to continue to have way more upside than Tyler Algier does. But Tyler Algier's floor, given the amount of carries he's getting, isn't all that bad. And if he adds a touchdown for you, that just helps as well. And we might be in a position right now where we just can't really pick and choose who we're going with. So Tyler Algier is definitely going to be a guy a lot of people will be starting this week. Even if his floor is like 50 to 60 yards, 5 to 6 points, the hope is that he goes over that when he scores a touchdown. Bijan's going to have a ton of upside once again, though, and is obviously going to be a start for us. Now, this could be the week that we finally see Jahmyr Gibbs unleashed. He only had 14 touches last week, and they weren't great. He did not look as good in week 2 as he did in week 1, for whatever reason that may be. But not only is David Montgomery potentially going to be missing a few weeks, and those are David Montgomery's words, not mine, and the fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown is beat up right now, the offensive tackles are beat up, Detroit is just all around beat up. And because of that, this could be Jahmyr Gibbs' week. We could see plenty of him on the ground and in the air. In Detroit, you decided to pass on a defensive player like Jalen Carter, who could have won you that game against Seattle last week, in favor of Jahmyr Gibbs instead. Do us all a favor. Show us why you drafted him in the first round this week. For the New Orleans Saints and the Green Bay Packers, there's just so many question marks related to this game right now. As of this recording, no idea how long Jamal Williams could be out. Kendre Miller was inactive again in week 2, and Tony Jones was the guy that took over after Jamal Williams left. and Alvin Kamara is still going to be suspended for another game. This backfield is a complete mess right now, and honestly, in week 3, I'm not interested in trying to figure any of it out. But for the Green Bay Packers, the hope is that Aaron Jones plays. If Aaron Jones plays, I'll start Aaron Jones, even if there's some risk with it, even if we're worried about him potentially re-hurting that hamstring or not being a full go. If Aaron Jones plays, we really don't have a whole lot of options. We've got to put him in our lineup. But A.J. Dillon was super disappointing last week. And now they're going to be facing a defense that allows the 14th fewest rushing yards and the 11th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. Given the way that A.J. Dillon looked last week, if Aaron Jones were to miss again, I'm not going to be interested in trying to start A.J. Dillon. Unless, of course, you don't have any other choice. Houston and Jacksonville is going to have another matchup of two good young running backs. And I know Dameon Pierce is not off to the start that you would have hoped this season. And I understand why you might be a little bit worried about that, but I'm not willing to jump ship yet. But I also know week 3 isn't going to get any easier for him. This is a Jacksonville defense that has allowed the 8th fewest rushing yards to running backs and the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the position so far. And if that defense gets after CJ Stroud again and they're forced to play catch up the entire game, that's going to hurt Dameon Pierce. The best shot to Dameon Pierce being a top 24 option this week is Houston being able to control the game early, stay balanced, chew up some of the clock against Jacksonville, and let Dameon Pierce pick up a decent amount of first and second quarter yards. Unfortunately, if the game starts to get out of hand in the second quarter, Dameon Pierce may disappear as well. Travis Etienne had a pretty good game in week 1, had a disappointing game in week 2, but now he's getting a defense that he can absolutely run the ball against. And what's even better than that right now is the fact that Tank Bigsby didn't get one touch last week on the ground or in the air. Dearness Johnson was the only other running back to get any touches. Right now, Travis Etienne is full-fledged the guy in this Jacksonville backfield. And like I said, you may not be super excited about how he performed in week 2, but you're not going to find a running back that's getting more looks in the backfield outside of like a Christian McCaffrey than what Travis Etienne is right now. And now he's going to be getting a matchup going up against Houston, who's been very vulnerable to the run so far this year. And if it's positive game script, Travis Etienne could have a top 5 week. Denver and Miami is going to bring a lot of potential at the running back position. Both of these defenses have been pretty soft against the run to start the year so far. So what's going to happen going forward with them? Miami did bounce back against New England last week after allowing a ton of rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in week 1 to the Los Angeles Chargers. And now they're going to get the double-headed backfield of Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. And I would love to list one of these guys as a safe start this week, but I can't, because yes, Miami did play better last week against the run, but also on top of it, both of these guys are going to be getting touches. Javonte Williams is just not himself right now. The explosiveness just hasn't come back as of yet, which makes sense. But Samaje Perine, who could have done a lot better last week, had a really down performance. And my hope is that if he were to contribute, it's going to be in the passing game. There was several places, our draft guide, videos that I did, where I listed Raheem Mostert as one of the biggest sleepers of this fantasy offseason. And I'll admit, the first 2 weeks of the year, I wasn't completely on board with utilizing him as much as I would have liked to, just because I didn't love the matchups. And he absolutely blew up this past week. So you know what? We definitely got to utilize him going forward. But it also needs to be remembered that he's going to bring risk in an offense that is really, for the most part, going to be passing first. Did Jalen Waddle leaving last week have something to do with it? Does Jalen Waddle play this week? There's going to be a lot of questions around that. Mostert's going to bring a pretty good floor for you and a pretty decent ceiling as well. But really the question is going to be, does he finish closer to the ceiling or lower to the floor? And that's one thing I just don't think we can really bet on as of yet. The Chargers and the Vikings are going to bring a matchup of inefficient headaches that you all hate from week 2. Joshua Kelly and Alexander Mattison. Now, Kelly had not a great matchup last week. And when I talked about his matchup, my hope was that he got between 50 and 60 yards and he scored a touchdown. Because when you look at some of the past data from the Los Angeles Chargers, a running back scores in typically about 85% of their matchups when they make it to the red zone 2 or more times. And my hope is that Joshua Kelly would have gotten one of those touchdowns last week, but he didn't. Now going up against a Minnesota team that has allowed a decent amount of yards on the ground to running backs, if there's no Austin Eckler this week, which as of right now during this recording, it doesn't seem like it, my hope is that Joshua Kelly also hits that 50 to 60 yard plateau, but gives us the touchdown that we needed last week. Now I will say, even though Alexander Mattison is in yellow, he's closer to being red than he is green for me, because this is a matchup where Minnesota's probably going to have to throw it a little bit. Justin Herbert versus Kirk Cousins, flying through the air, a whole lot of passing yards, but not a whole lot of rushing attempts, and I don't know about that efficiency for Alexander Mattison. I expressed some concern about that in the preseason, that maybe even if the volume was there, that the efficiency just wouldn't be what we want. And that's kind of what we saw through the first couple of weeks of the season. And the efficiency isn't great. Some of the volume hasn't been there because Minnesota's had to throw the ball a ton. And because of that, Alexander Mattison is trending closer and closer to not only being a red for me on a weekly basis, but potentially losing his job to Ty Chandler. For as good as the Jets defense seems to be when you're watching them, when you look at the paper, which you can on this graphic right now, there's a lot of green on the defensive side of the ball right now for the New York Jets. For whatever reason that may be, there's probably a few areas that they could afford to tighten up a little bit. But the concern in this isn't necessarily the matchup for Ramondre Stevenson. It's kind of been the usage through the first couple of weeks. Now, Ramondre Stevenson has been a top 24 back each of the first couple of weeks. And you could have done a lot worse, we'll say that, than what Ramondre Stevenson did. But I know we haven't gotten the performance that we would have loved from him as of yet. Now, Zeke Elliott isn't getting a whole lot of touches. But Ramondre Stevenson isn't really being utilized in the passing game the way that we would have liked to, and unfortunately in last week's matchup, it just wasn't great for him to put up that type of efficiency. This Jets defense is still really good, so I don't know if the efficiency will be there this week. My hope is, though, that the volume will be more than enough to carry Ramondre Stevenson to another top 24 potential start. The Patriots defense right now is ranked 23rd against the run, so this would be a great opportunity for Breece Hall to get back to work. But just keep in mind what I talked about last week, and there was a lot of people that brushed it off as being a really stupid point, and I want to try and hammer it home one more time to help you guys understand what I'm talking about. With Breece Hall, in week 1, he had 3 big plays, 1 through the air and 2 on the ground. If you take away his 2 biggest runs from week 1, the dude only averaged just over 2 yards per carry, and my concern was that if you don't get that big run, that 80-yard, 60-yard, 50-yard run every single week, is he going to be efficient enough right now as he works his way back from injury? And that is exactly what happened in their week 2 matchup. Yeah, he didn't get nearly as many touches as we would have liked, but he also looked really bad on the touches that he got. So my hope is that we get Breece Hall back to anywhere between 10 to 12 touches in this matchup. And if that happens, given the defense that they're playing against, I do anticipate a potential big play happening for Breece Hall. So it becomes a little bit more of like a middle of the road risk for me. He's definitely going to be a start, but I don't know if he'll quite crack my top 15. If you want to be super upset with the Buffalo Bills coaching staff, I would agree with you. James Cook went off on the ground last week. Absolutely great performance in the running game. But why in the world is Damian Harris and Latavius Murray coming out in the red zone? That cost James Cook what could have been like a top 2 or 3 performance at the position last week. Sometimes, though, you have to take what you can get. And with James Cook, we're getting touches and we're getting rushing yards. Maybe he's not a top 5 or top 10 running back right now, but given the volume and the amount of usage that he still has, I'm still willing to say that this is a guy that's going to be a 12 to 15 option every week. Buffalo Bills defense have been pretty good against the pass so far this season, but they're kind of middle of road against the run right now, ranked 19th in the NFL. This is a great opportunity for Brian Robinson to go out and have another decent week. Now, is he going to have a big week like he did in week 2? Maybe not, but he's the guy in the backfield. He's getting the touches on the ground. The Washington offense is staying balanced, and he's also getting a few looks through the air as well. Antonio Gibson really isn't doing anything right now. He's no concern to Brian Robinson, Brian Robinson has definitely been that dude to start the season. The offensive stats right now for the Carolina Panthers don't look great. Bryce Young himself hasn't looked awful. He hasn't looked great at times either, and that's not completely his fault. But one thing does stick out to me. They are 9th right now in rushing yards in the NFL as a team. Miles Sanders is a guy that is still getting plenty of touches, and they're working along Bryce Young slowly, and they're trying to stay as a very, very balanced offense to help in that. And this Seahawks team has done pretty good against the run so far this season, but Miles Sanders is going to be a pretty safe bet for me this week. Maybe the upside isn't what we would want, but the reason I'm not listing him as a more of a risk start this week is because I know he's going to get the volume, and Carolina is doing everything they can to run the football. So for me, given the injuries that we're dealing with, those are the type of players I want in my lineup. Now, Kenneth Walker didn't have a great day in terms of rushing yards last week, but he scored 2 touchdowns. This is going to be a little bit of a better matchup for him. Carolina's defense has been really, really good against the pass, but they haven't been great against the run so far. Carolina's defense is ranked 25th in the NFL in rushing yards right now, and they have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to the position. For those of you that drafted Kenneth Walker, you probably haven't absolutely loved the start. But the good thing about the start has been the fact that Zach Charbonnet has been basically underutilized, if you want to put it that way. Kenneth Walker's still the guy. But this week, this matchup, this is the one y'all have been waiting for. Tony Pollard is off to a fantastic start, and going up against the Arizona Cardinals this week, their defense has really been middle of the road to bottom 3rd in a lot of defensive categories. This is going to be another great opportunity for Tony Pollard, especially if Dallas can get out in front and give them a positive game script to work with. Then Tony Pollard is going to see more than enough volume, and he's going to have touchdown upside as well. But for James Conner, he's going to be going up against one of the toughest defenses in all the NFL right now. And unfortunately, he's probably not going to have a very efficient day. For what he's not going to get on the ground this week, though, I'm hoping he gets through the air. He gets a few targets, maybe gets a receiving touchdown or something like that. He's going to have a lot of risk. And honestly, he's probably closer to red than he is to green for me right now. But again, given the state of the running back position and the injuries that we're dealing with, when you've got a workhorse like James Conner that's really not going to lose a lot of touches to other players, you typically have to put him in your lineup anyway. Kansas City's defense got Chris Jones back last week, and they looked great against the run, and that's really no surprise. So given the fact that Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are splitting touches right now, and that it's a tough matchup, I'm not really interested in starting either guy this week. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind with the Bears backfield, this is still Khalil Herbert's job. Even though Roschon Johnson was a little bit more efficient than him last week, Khalil Herbert still had more volume and was pretty darn efficient himself as well. I don't see Roschon Johnson taking over in this matchup, but it's also something that we'll continue to eye in the coming weeks, and when the time comes, he might be the starting running back and we would throw him in our lineup. But for right now, I'm going to probably be out on both of these guys against Kansas City. In terms of total offense allowed to the running back position, the Bears defense has kind of been middle of the road, but they're bottom 3rd in fantasy points allowed to the position. Isaiah Pacheco is definitely a guy that doesn't have a ton of ceiling right now, but he's got the best floor. Jerick McKinnon isn't being utilized, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire missed last week. So is McKinnon going to be utilized more going forward? At this point, it doesn't look like it, but that could change. So Isaiah Pacheco is definitely a guy that if you start him, you just have to realize his ceiling isn't really that high because he's not that type of running back, but his floor is good enough that he's not really going to lose you a week, it feels like, either. If there was ever a time for 2 running backs to bounce back, it would be in this matchup. Both Pittsburgh and Las Vegas have not been good against the run this season. Both Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris are coming off pretty poor performances. Now, Josh Jacobs has a much better opportunity to bounce back than Najee Harris because Jacobs is a guy that's still being heavily utilized in the offense, even if his numbers haven't really shown him yet. In fact, really only Saquon Barkley has been able to compete with the amount of touches, targets, and looks that Josh Jacobs has gotten in his offense. Again, he hasn't scored and the yards haven't been there, but he's been on the field and he's gotten the touches. Hopefully this is the matchup where the yards and the performance actually come together. Najee Harris's biggest issue right now is Jaylen Warren just looks a whole lot better than him, especially in the passing game. Najee Harris, it looks like the dude is just running into the back of his entire offensive line. Now, is it completely Harris's fault? No, it's not. But again, the concern about his inefficiency rears his ugly head. He just has not been good. He has not been the type of high upside back that should come with the amount of volume that he's been getting. Now, this is the matchup that you would want for him to bounce back. So if you own Najee Harris, we're going to be putting him in our lineup. But the reason he has a mild risk this week is because Jaylen Warren is coming for that job. And for Jaylen Warren, I'm probably not going to start him in like a standard or a half PPR league. But for those of you out there that play in a full PPR league and you're desperate for somebody, Jaylen Warren absolutely could be a flex option for you this week. Now, this is going to be a really tough matchup for DeAndre Swift and Rachaad White. The Eagles and the Buccaneers are 1-2 in rushing defense so far this season, and both of them are top 10 in fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. I know DeAndre Swift is coming off a huge game, and as of this recording, there's no idea if Kenneth Gainwell will make his way back this week. So it looks like DeAndre Swift, as of now, will be the main back and will get a majority of the touches. But this is a really tough defense, so there's definitely going to be some risk to starting DeAndre Swift this week. But if there's no Kenneth Gainwell, we're starting DeAndre Swift anyway, just for the potential amount of volume that he could be getting. And for Rachaad White, he's also going to bring a lot of risk this week. But again, he's going to be getting a majority of the volume in the backfield. Just know, going up against the Eagles' run defense, that inefficiency that I have talked about with Rachaad White is going to pop up again this week. You're going to be hoping for a touchdown. If Rachaad White doesn't get a touchdown for you this week, he's going to be at best an RB3. Our last game of the slate with the Rams and the Bengals is also going to bring a couple of defenses that are underperforming against the run right now. And Cam Akers, I'm going to leave him listed on the slide because as of this recording, he is still a Los Angeles Ram. Now, will he dress again this week if they don't get a trade done? Who knows? I'm not sure about that. But Kyren Williams, we know for a fact, is the guy. The guy played like 70, I think it was like 70 or 71 out of 75 offensive snaps this past week. The dude was out there the entire time. And this is a Bengals defense that is currently ranked dead last against the run. There's definitely a lot of touchdown upside, and for the amount of volume that Kyren Williams is getting, he's got top 12 upside for me this week. Now, the Rams defense is ranked 24th against the run, and that would make you think that Joe Mixon would be a pretty decent option. In fact, he's averaging well over 4 yards a carry, and efficiency standpoint hasn't looked awful the first couple of weeks of the season. But the rest of his offense has looked awful, and that's the biggest issue right now. We don't even know who the quarterback is going to be this week because Joe Burrow could end up being out after re-aggravating his calf injury. So whoever it ends up being, this offense, especially the passing game, is going to have to get rolling if Joe Mixon is going to get rolling. And the amount of carries he's getting right now, he's not looking bad. But they're not being able to stay balanced because they're falling behind and they're having to try and play catch up with their strong air game with Joe Burrow and those fantastic wide receivers there. If they can get into a game situation that stays more balanced, where they can run the football a little bit more often, then I would expect a bigger output from Joe Mixon that week. All right, Headliner Nation, there you have it. My start and sit video for running backs in week 3. And again, one more time, I just want to point out, we're dealing with a ton of injuries right now. And because of that, you might be forced to start some guys who are in red in this video. Red just doesn't necessarily mean sit. Now, in some cases it does, but in other cases, if a player is listed in red, it just means they have a very high risk potential this week, and they could end up having a decent ceiling, but their floor is super, super low for multiple reasons. So if you have to start a guy in red, then you have to start a guy in red. But also, don't forget, we're giving away that Kenneth Walker autographed jersey, and if you're wanting to win that jersey, you got to sign up at Pristine Auction, but then make sure you leave a comment on this video and let me know, one, under the radar running back you think has top 12 potential this week. Also, make sure you hit that like button on the way out for me. I want to see like 3,000 likes on this running back video because I just want to know you all out there are appreciating the content. But most importantly, if you're new here to the channel, hit the subscribe button and stick around for the rest of the season. Peace out, Headliner Nation. I'm getting out of here. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.